The wind moved through the tall trees, making a soft sound like whispers in the dark. The forest was quiet, but something felt wrong. The human man named Jack walked slowly, looking around with careful steps. He was not from this world, but he had landed. Here to study the land and collect samples for his research, he did not expect to find life. But now he was not so sure. Strange sound came from the trees. It was a voice. It was small and shaking like a cry for help. Jack stopped. He listened again. The voice came again, this time clearer. It said, "Please help." Jack looked around. He could see nothing but trees and glowing plants. He walked toward the sound. The voice came again. This time it said, "Please help her. She is stuck." Jack moved faster, pushing. Leaves out of his way, the voice sounded like a child, a scared child, alone in the woods. He followed the sound until he reached a clearing. There, standing near a glowing rock, was a small alien boy. His skin was soft blue, his eyes big and full of tears. The boy looked at Jack. He did not run. He just stood there shaking and said again, "Please help her." "My mom is stuck." Jack went down on one knee and spoke softly. "What happened? Where is she?" The boy pointed toward the deep part of the forest. He said she went to find food, but the ground broke and she fell. "I ran, but now I cannot help her." "I do not know what to do." Jack looked at the forest. It was dark and full of strange sounds. He looked back at the boy. "What is your name?" the boy said. "My name is Zelu." Jack said, "Okay, Zelu, I will help you. Take me to her." Zelu nodded and turned. He began to walk. Jack followed behind, keeping his light ready and his hand close to his tool belt. They walked deeper. The forest became colder. The trees looked older and the air was heavy with a strange smell. The plants looked like they were moving just a little, as if breathing. Zelu spoke softly. "She is near, but there is something else here." To Jack asked, "What do you mean?" Zelu said, "I think something is watching you." Jack looked around. He saw nothing, but he felt it to a strange feeling on his neck, like eyes were behind him. The trees seemed to close in. The path became thin, and the light from the sky was now gone. Only the glow from the plants showed. The Wazlu stopped near a broken part of the land. A hole was in the ground, deep and dark. Jack looked down. He could not see the bottom. Zelu said, "She fell down there." Jack looked for a way to climb down. He found a path of rocks that went along the edge. He turned to Zelu. "Stay here. It is not safe." "I will go." Zelu grabbed Jack's arm. "No, do not go alone. It is not just a hole. There is something inside." "Something that moves?" Jack asked. "Did you see it?" Zelu shook his head. "I heard it. It growled. It made my bones shake." Jack knew this was not just a rescue mission now. Something was inside that pit. Something not friendly. Still, he could not leave her down there. He looked at the walls of the hole. He pulled a rope from his pack, tied it to a tree, and began to go down. Zelu stayed above, watching with wide eyes. Jack went slow. His light showed the rocky walls. The deeper he went, the colder it became, as in lines came from below. It was a low sound, a growl. Jack stopped. He turned. His light below the beam hit something big and gray. It moved fast. Out of the light, Jack heard a hiss, then silences. Heart beat faster. He looked down again. Nothing. Just darkness. He took a deep breath and kept going. After a few more steps, he reached the bottom. It was a wide space, like a small cave. He called out, "Hello, can you hear me?" A soft voice came back. "Help." Jack turned and saw a shape under some rocks. It was Zelu's mother. She was hurt, but alive. Jack ran to her. He began to move the rocks carefully. She looked at him with weak eyes. "You are not one of us." Jack said, "No. I am here because your son asked for help." She smiled slightly. "He is brave." Then Jack heard it again, a low growl from behind. He turned fast. His light hit the wall. Nothing moved, but the growl came again, closer. This time Jack stood in front of the mother, ready to protect her. From above, Zelu shouted, "Mr. Jack, something is coming from the side." Jack looked left side of the cave. A shadow moved fast. And then everything went quiet again. The only sound was the breathing of the mother and the soft cry of Zelu. Above, Jack held his light high and whispered to himself. What is hiding in this darkness? Jack stood still, holding the light in one hand, while his other hand stayed close to the tool belt. His eyes searched every dark corner of the rocky pit, but nothing moved. The alien mother lay on the ground behind him, hurt and weak. She whispered to him with a shaking voice, "Be careful, it does not like." The light Jack turned his flashlight in all directions. The shadows on the cave walls danced and twisted like they were alive. A cold wind passed through the tunnel ahead, and Jack could hear the soft sound of breathing, but it was not his own Zillow. Called from above, again his voice full of fear. "Mr. Jack, are you there? Is my mom okay?" Jack shouted back. "I found her. She is alive, but something else is here." "Stay where you are. I will bring her back." The alien mother tried to sit up, but she cried in pain. Jack bent down and placed her arm around his shoulder. Slowly, he helped her stand. She could not walk well, so he held most of her weight. They moved together step by step. Toward the rope, the growl came again. This time, louder and closer. Jack turned the flashlight quickly toward the sound, but once again, he saw nothing. The mother whispered again, "It waits until the light is gone." The rope still hung from the surface, but it was too high to reach without climbing. Jack looked around for a rock or something to help, but the ground was smooth and empty. Zelu shouted again, "I will come down and help." Jack yelled back, "No, stay there." Suddenly, the cave shook, a loud noise came from the dark tunnel, and something heavy moved toward them. Jack grabbed the flashlight with both hands and pointed it at the tunnel entrance. His hands did not stop shaking. Then he saw it, a shape big and low to the ground. Its skin looked like stone, and its eyes were deep red. It stopped when the light hit its face and growled loud enough to make the rocks vibrate. Jack shouted, "Go back." He picked up a small rock and threw it. The rock hit the beast, but it did not move away. It just blinked slowly and showed sharp, long teeth. The mother whispered again, "That is the guardian of the deep. It hates the surface, but it hunts anything that enters this place." Jack asked, "How do we escape?" She said, "There is another way. A secret path through the old roots, but it is dangerous." Jack helped her walk away from the rope toward the far wall where thick, twisted roots grew out of the rock. She pointed to a small opening behind the roots. Jack moved them aside and saw a narrow path glowing slightly from inside. The mother said, "This path is alive. The walls feel your fear. Do not stop or it will trap you." Jack nodded and helped her step inside. The tunnel was tight and smelled like wet earth. The glow from the walls lit their way, but Jack still held the flashlight behind them. The guardian roared again. The sound echoed through the roots. Jack felt the tunnel shake. He moved faster, helping the mother stay on her feet. As they moved deeper, the roots closed behind them, sealing the path. The glow grew brighter, but the air became thin. Jack started to feel light-headed. The mother said, "The tunnel tests you. It makes your body weak to see if you are strong inside." Jack kept walking. His legs hurt and his back felt like fire, but he did not stop. He looked back once and saw the root wall close behind them, trapping the guardian on the other side for now. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a round room with a soft light coming from a pool of water in the center. Jack helped the mother sit near the pool. She touched the water with one hand and the color changed from blue to green. She whispered, "Thank you." Jack asked, "What is this place?" She said, "This is the Chamber of Healing, but it only works if the forest accepts you. The water is for those who respect life." Jack looked around the room, had drawings on the walls, pictures of other beings who had come before. Some looked human, some did not. All had their hands raised toward the sky. He asked, "Will it heal you?" She nodded slowly, "But yes, you saved me. My son will be safe because of youth." Glow from the water rose into the air, and small lights floated around them like fireflies. The mother looked at Jack with soft eyes. "You have a kind heart, stranger from the stars." Then Jack heard Zelu calling again, this time very close. The root wall behind them opened slowly, and the boy ran inside. He dropped to his knees and hugged his mother, crying loud tears. She held him tight and whispered, "My brave son Jack." Smiled, but then he felt the air shift again. A sound came from the tunnel behind Zelu. Different sound, not like the Guardian, something sharper, something faster. Zelu looked up and said softly, "That sound is not the Guardian. That sound is not the Guardian. That is something else." The lights in the healing room flickered. The water turned dark. The mother stood slowly and said, "We are not safe yet. We must keep moving." Jack took a deep breath and turned toward the dark tunnel ahead. Whatever waited for them now was worse than what they had left behind. But he would not run. He would protect them both, even if it cost him everything. The soft lights in the healing chamber started to fade slowly, turning from green to dull gray. The air became heavy, and the water in the pool began to shake in small ripples. Jack looked around, holding the flashlight tightly in his hand. His eyes moved from one wall to another, searching for movement. Zelu stood close to his mother, his arms around her waist. He looked scared, but did not cry this time. He whispered something in his own language, and the mother replied with a nod. Her voice was low and calm, but her face showed fear. The tunnel behind them was now open, but the sound that came from it did not belong to the Guardian from before. This sound was sharp like metal sliding over stone, fast and angry. Jack took one step forward and shined his light into the tunnel, but the beam did not reach far. The walls were wet and black, and seemed to swallow the light. The mother said, "This is not a creature from the forest. This one comes from below." Jack asked, "What is it?" She said, "It is the crawler of bones. It feeds on fear and chases life. It never stops once it smells breath." Told them both to stay behind him. He walked slowly into the tunnel. His flashlight flickered for a moment and then came back on. He moved forward carefully, listening to every sound. The tunnel twisted left and right, making it hard to see far. He saw something on the ground. A trail of slime, thick and dark. It smelled like old blood and salt. Jack did not like it, but he kept going. A noise came from above. He looked up and saw nothing but the roof of the tunnel. Suddenly something dropped behind him, fast and quiet. Jack turned quickly. His light hit the wall, but nothing was there. He looked back and saw Zelu holding a rock ready to throw. His mother stood behind him, whispering words from her language. Jack felt it again. Something was moving, but not on the ground. It was crawling through the walls inside the stone itself, like a shadow with claws. He told them to run. The mother said, "There is an exit, but we must cross the trial of HFY Sci." Took her hand and pulled gently. Jack followed as they moved deeper into the tunnel. The air changed again, becoming warmer, but full of strange sounds, like voices but not real voices. They echoed from the walls, speaking old words from different tongues. Zelu looked scared again. He said, "The voices speak my name." Jack said, "Ignore them. Keep going. They are tricks. The crawler uses them to find Usas." They moved faster. Jack saw lights ahead, not natural lights but orange and red like fire torches. They entered a new chamber with high walls and an open roof above. A broken ladder hung down from the side, leading to a ledge high above. Jack asked, "Can we climb out from there?" The mother nodded, but she said, "One must distract the crawler or it will follow us." Zelu said, "I will do it." Jack grabbed his shoulder. "No, I will do it. You climb with her and wait for me." Zelu wanted to argue, but his mother nodded. "Go with him. He is our hope." Jack gave them a strong rope from his bag and helped them reach the ladder. Zelu climbed first, then helped his mother slowly. Jack stayed at the bottom, shining the flashlight toward the tunnel. The sound came again. This time louder claws on stone, a hiss that made the walls tremble. A shape moved in the darkness, not walking but gliding fast across the rocks. Jack saw its eyes, small and many, all glowing red. It had no mouth, only long fingers with sharp hooks. Jack threw a flare toward it. The light hit the ground and lit the tunnel. The crawler screamed a high sound like metal breaking and moved back for a moment. Jack used the chance to climb a short wall and hide behind a stone. Zelu shouted from above, "Hurry! Jack climbed fast, but the stone under him cracked. He slipped and fell back to the ground, his arm hit a sharp rock, and blood came out the crawler. Smelled it, and charged Jack got up, holding his arm. He grabbed another flare and threw it again. The crawler slowed, but did not stop. Jack looked up and saw Zelu reaching down with the rope. Jack jumped and grabbed it just as the crawler leaped the rope, pulled Jack up fast. Zelu and his mother pulled with all their strength. The crawler almost touched his foot, but the flare light hit its eyes again. And it fell back with a loud scream. They reached the top and fell to the ground. Breathing hard, the crawler stayed below, hissing but not climbing. The light from the flares kept it back for now. The mother looked at Jack and touched his shoulder. "You gave us a chance to live." Zelu hugged him with tears again. But this time they were warm, not sad. Looked at the stars above through the broken roof and said softly, "We are not safe yet, but we are still here, and that is enough for now." The stars above them looked calm and cold, but the world below was still full of danger. Jack sat near the edge of the broken roof, breathing hard. His arm hurt and blood ran slowly down to his hand, but he did not care for now. He looked at Zelu and his mother. Both safe and close. Zelu held the rope tightly in his hands, as if afraid to let go. The mother looked around with sharp eyes, searching for the next step. Her voice was low, but steady. "We cannot stop here too long. The crawler will not stay down forever." Jack nodded and stood up with care. They were now in a narrow space on the edge of a cliff. A small platform of stone led to a bridge made of roots and old wood. The bridge moved a little, with the wind creaking like an old ship at sea. Below the bridge was a deep pit full of black smoke and strange green lights that floated like lost souls. Jack asked, "Is that the only way?" The mother nodded. "It is called the Bridge of Weight. It senses your heart and your truth. If you lie or carry fear, it breaks." Beneath, Zelu looked down at the pit and held his mother's hand tighter. Jack stepped forward and placed one foot on the bridge. It did not break, but it made a deep sound like a heartbeat. He looked back at them and said, "Stay close to me, but do not run. Keep your steps slow and clean." One by one, they stepped onto the bridge. The wind blew harder now, and the lights below started to rise, moving like snakes made of fire. The bridge shook with every step, but held strong halfway across. Jack heard a loud crack. He turned and saw a small piece of wood fall into the pit. Zelu had stepped too hard. Jack whispered, "Soft steps, like water, not stone." Zelu nodded and moved again more gently. They reached the middle of the bridge when the sound returned. A roar from below, not from the crawler, but something else, something older. Jack looked down and saw a shape moving in the smoke. Something with wings too big and eyes that glowed yellow. The mother whispered, "The guardian of the pit, it wakes when the bridge is touched too long. Hurry now." Jack led them faster, but the bridge began to crack. The wood behind them fell piece by piece. The wind screamed louder, and the yellow eyes rose higher. Zelu ran forward and reached the end first. Jack pushed the mother to move faster. She almost slipped, but Jack caught her. They both jumped off the last part of the bridge as it broke behind them. The guardian below roared again, but the smoke closed around it, hiding its face. They stood on the other side, breathing fast. The ground here was soft and full of white flowers glowing in the dark. The mother fell to her knees and touched the ground with care. "This place is pure." She smiled and closed her eyes for a moment. Jack looked around the path. Ahead was narrow but clear. It went into a wall covered in vines and light. Zelu asked, "Is this the way out?" The mother opened her eyes and said, "This is the trial of memory. It shows you what you fear most, but you must keep walking no matter what." You see, Jack did not speak. He just helped her stand again and took Zelu's hand together. They walked into the light. The vines opened and the wall let them pass inside. The path changed. It was no longer stone, but soft like sand under their feet. The air was warm and full of voices, voices from the past, voices that should not be here. Jack heard his own name spoken by someone he had lost long ago. A sister whose face he could not forget. He stopped for a second and turned, but there was no one there, only the soft wind and the light around them, the mother said. Do not listen, do not stop. Zelu looked around and saw shapes moving near the walls, shapes of his friends, shapes of lost faces from his village. He held Jack's hand tighter and said, they are not real, right? Jack nodded. They are not real, just ghosts of our thoughts. They walked faster now. The path twisted, and the lights grew stronger. One moment it looked like day, and the next like night. The walls moved like waves, and the ground under their feet seemed to breathe. Suddenly, Jack fell into a hole hidden under the sand. Zelu shouted and ran to him. The mother followed. Jack was gone, but they could hear his voice below. He was in a lower chamber, dark and wet. The floor was full of bones and old tools left behind by others who had failed the trial. The lights above did not reach him, but his voice stayed strong. Why? Here I am, okay, do not come down, stay up there, I will climb back. He looked around for something to hold, but the walls were smooth and tall. Then he saw a mark on the stone. A small handprint glowing red. He placed his hand over it and the stone opened. A rope dropped from above. He climbed fast, ignoring the pain in his arm and the weight in his chest. Zelu and his mother pulled the rope with all their strength together. They lifted him out of the hole and into the light. A Ganj stood and smiled, covered in dust and sweat. But a live Zelu hugged him, and the mother whispered, the trial ends. When the heart stays strong ahead of them, the wall opened again, showing the final path. The wind was fresh, and the sound of running water could be heard, but none of them smiled yet, because the light ahead was too still and the silence was too perfect. The silence ahead was deep, like a sleeping beast hiding under still water. Jack stepped forward, slowly keeping Zelu and his mother close behind. The tunnel they entered was not like the others before. It was wide and clean, with no roots or vines. The floor was smooth and white like ice, but warm underfoot. The walls were made of silver stone with strange lines running across them, glowing faint blue with every step they took. The air felt heavy again, but not cold. It was full of pressure, like something watched them from above and below. At the same time, Zelu held his mother's hand tight and looked up at Jack. His eyes asked the question that his lips could not. Jack gave him a nod and whispered, keep walking, no matter what you feel. Just walk. They walked together in silence for a while until they reached a wide space that looked like a hall with tall pillars reaching the dark ceiling. In the center of the hall, there was a stone bed with soft green light floating above it. Jack could see someone lying there, a body covered in dust and white cloth. The mother stepped forward faster. Her legs shook, but she moved without help. She fell to her knees beside the stone bed and touched the face under the cloth. It was another alien woman, like her, with the same marks on her skin, but older. Her eyes were closed, and her breath was slow and broken. Mother whispered something in her own language. Her hands shook as she placed them over the chest of the sleeping woman. Jack stood back with Zelu and asked softly, who is she? The mother turned her head with tears in her eyes. She is my sister. She was taken by the mountain 3 cycles ago. We all thought she was lost. Zelu came closer and touched the edge of the stone bed. His voice was soft. Is she still alive? The mother nodded. Barely. Her breath is weak, but her spirit is still here. The mountain kept her in sleep. Jack looked around the room, searching for signs of danger. The walls were covered in strange symbols, some of them glowing red and others fading to black. Something felt wrong. Like the air was waiting for something to change. Suddenly, the green light above the bed began to spin. It moved faster and changed color, turning from green to yellow, then orange, then red. The sister on the stone bed opened her eyes and gasped for air. She looked at her sister and Zelu, and then at Jack. Her voice was broken, but strong enough to say, you should not be here. The ground under their feet shook for a moment and then stopped. The red lights on the walls began to spread like veins, reaching the ceiling and the floor. The mother held her sister and tried to lift her from the bed, but the stone held her down. Jack stepped closer and tried to help, but the light pushed him back with a shock-like heat. Without fire, the sister grabbed the mother's hand and said, "Go now. Take him and the child and leave. I cannot follow." Zhu cried and begged her to come with them, but the sister smiled and said, "This is my place now. I'm the keeper. I woke too late, and now the mountain calls for blood." The floor cracked and a loud sound filled the room like metal tearing apart. The pillars began to fall one by one, and the walls started to close, and Jack pulled the mother and Zelu back and shouted, "We need to move." The mother tried to fight, but her sister pushed her away with the last of her strength. A bright light rose from the stone bed and covered her body. A shield of red and white surrounded her as the roof began to fall. Jack pulled them both out of the hall just before the entrance closed with a loud crash. Dust filled the air, and the tunnel behind them was gone forever. They ran down a new path that opened in the side of the wall. Their steps echoed with every breath. Their hearts beat like drums. Zelu kept looking back with tears, but his feet never stopped. Path led to a small chamber with a pool of clear water and a light above it. A circle of stone stood in the center with handprints on its surface. The mother touched the stone, and the handprint glowed gold. A doorway opened, showing the sky and the stars again. Jack helped her step through. The night wind touched their faces, and the smell of real air filled their lungs. Zelu ran out and fell on the grass crying for his aunt. The mother sat on the ground and closed her eyes, holding the wind in her hands. Jack looked at the stars and said softly, "She gave her breath to save us." The mother nodded and whispered, "She was born under this mountain, and she became its voice in the end." They sat there for a while, letting the silence speak. Zelu placed a small stone on the ground near the doorway and whispered goodbye in his language. Jack stood up and looked toward the hills far ahead. He said, "We are not done yet." The mother looked at him and said, "No, but now we have hope behind them." The mountain was quiet again. The light from inside faded slowly, and the wind carried the last breath of the keeper into the sky, and for the first time since they entered the dark, something felt at peace. The wind moved through the hills with soft hands brushing the grass like a gentle goodbye. Jack stood tall on the edge of the slope, watching the stars move slowly across the sky. The mother sat beside her son, who was silent now, his eyes looking at the place where the doorway once stood. Now only part of the mountain. Again they had escaped the heart of the dark. But Jack knew it was not over. The air was still full of something old, something sleeping. But knock on the ground under them was calm, but it was not safe. The mother placed her hand on the earth and closed her eyes. She whispered something to the soil, and the wind stopped for one long moment. Then the ground gave a soft sound like breath. After a long sleep, she opened her eyes and looked at Jack with a strange glow in her gaze. She said softly, "The mountain has changed. It knows what we did. It knows who helped us." Jack nodded and looked toward the trees below. A soft red light flickered between the trunks, a rhythm slow and steady like the beat of a living heart. He said, "We need to move before it wakes again." The mother agreed, but her voice held something else, something that sounded like sorrow. They walked down the hill together toward the forest. The light followed them from a distance, not growing brighter, but never fading. Zelu walked close to his mother, holding her hand with both of his small ones. They entered the forest, and the trees made no sound. Their branches did not move, and the leaves were still like they were waiting. The red light disappeared behind them, swallowed by the dark ass. They walked deeper. A strange path opened with golden grass and soft dust that did not rise with steps. The trees around them began to change. Their bark turned from brown to silver, and small lights floated in the air like stars had fallen to rest. The mother stopped and pointed ahead. There stood a stone circle, wide and tall, with a platform in the center. The stones were marked with shapes Jack did not know, but Zelu looked at them with wide eyes and said, "This is the place of awakening. My mother told me stories about it, but I never believed it was real. Jack asked what happens here. The mother said, "It is where the mountain chooses it, gives power to those who pass the trials to carry its voice forward." She stepped onto the platform, and the lights in the air moved toward her. Slowly, they began to spin around her body, rising higher with every breath she took. The symbols on the stones glowed with soft blue, and then Jack stood back, with Zelu watching. The air became warmer and full of soft music, not made by voice or instrument, but by the space itself. Mother closed her eyes and opened her arms. Light touched her skin and wrapped around her like a robe. Her wounds faded and her eyes opened with a fire that was not there. Before she stepped down and looked at Jack with a new strength in her walk, she said, "I am not just a mother now. I am a guardian of the voice I hold." Part of the mountain inside Zelu looked at her with wonder and pride. Jack nodded and said, "Then we must leave this place with care. The mountain gave you power, but it may still test your heart." As they left the circle, the lights followed for a while, then faded one by one. The trees opened a path and led them to a wide river with clear water. The mother placed her hand into it, and the river glowed like silver for a short moment. They crossed safely and reached a small valley with soft hills and flowers that moved without wind. Zelu found a fruit tree and picked one of the glowing fruits, handing it to Jack smiled and took a bite. The taste was sweet and cold, like nothing he had ever known. They sat under the tree for a while, resting. Jack cleaned his tools and checked his pack, making sure nothing was lost. The mother sat with Zelu and told him stories of the mountain and the stars and the old times when her people lived in peace with the land. Suddenly the sky above changed. The stars began to blink fast and the moon grew red. Jack stood up and looked around. The air felt strange again, not dangerous, but alert. The mother said quietly, "The mountain speaks again, but this time with joy. It feels your truth, Jack, and it accepts youth." Ground near them cracked, and a small flower grew fast with golden petals. It shone like the sun and bent toward Jack as if bowing. He touched it and felt a wave of warmth move through his arms. Sal said, "The mountain knows you. It wants you to return one day." Jack looked at the flower and said, "Maybe I will." They packed their things and moved toward the outer edge of the valley, where a gate stood between two tall rocks, made of glass. The mother touched the gate and it opened, showing a field full of starlight and peace. They stepped through and the gate closed behind them. The sound of the wind returned soft and calm. The stars above were bright again, and the sky clear. Jack looked back one last time. The valley was gone, only trees stood there now, silent and stills. Celia walked beside him, holding his hand. His mother walked ahead with the light of the mountain in her steps. And for the first time, Jack felt something he had not felt in years. He felt homely. Air was fresh and full of the smell of wildflowers and new leaves. The valley behind them faded like a dream, swallowed by trees and time. Jack walked with calm steps through the silver grass. Zelu ran beside him with small, happy jumps, while the mother led them with silent strength in her eyes. They followed the stars above like a map written in light, and the ground under them hummed with soft warmth. Jack looked at the sky and felt a strange peace, like the world had finally stopped spinning too fast. The mother stopped near a wall of tall stone covered in vines and placed her hand on it. A slow golden line moved across the stone, opening a door with no sound. She turned to Jack and said, "This path leads outside the mountain, far away from the voice, but the mountain will still remember you." Jack nodded and followed her into the tunnel. Zelu held his hand and whispered, "I want to visit the stars with you one day." Jack smiled and gave his hand a soft squeeze. "Maybe you will, Zelu. Maybe you will." The tunnel was dry and wide, with lights that grew from the walls like living gems. They passed under arches and bridges that seemed to float in the air. The silence here was deep but not heavy. It was the kind of silence that lives in safe places. They reached a wide gate with a symbol of 3 moons carved into the metal. The mother touched the symbol, and the gate opened to a hill under the Night sky birds flew above them in slow, peaceful circles, and the wind was full of soft music like the mountain was singing goodbyes. Stepped out and felt grass under his boots. Real grass with dew and life. He looked back at the gate, but it had already closed behind them, hidden once more in the earth. They moved down the hill toward a village with lights that blinked like stars on the ground. Small homes stood close together with paths of white stone between them. People stood outside looking up at the stars and whispering to each other. As Jack and his friends reached the village, the people turned to look. Eyes wide and full of wonder, they saw the light in the mother's eyes, and they saw the strength in Zelu's step, and they saw the calm in Jack's face. Sane Elder came forward with slow steps, leaning on a staff made of crystal. He looked at the mother and said, "You carry the mountain's breath." She nodded and replied, "The mountain chose me, and it chose him too." Jack, who bowed his head with quiet respect, the elder looked at Jack and said, "You are not from here, but the mountain speaks your name now. You are one of us." They welcomed him with food and warm rest. They gave him a room with soft walls and a sky window above the bed. Zelu stayed close the whole time, asking questions about the stars and the human ships and the colors of other worlds. Jack answered with a soft voice, his words full of patience and care. The mother spent her time speaking with the elders, telling them of her sister and the trials and the gift the mountain had given her. She never raised her voice, but her words carried power and truth. That night, the stars blinked in strange ways, and the wind whispered around the houses. The mountain was quiet, but the world knew something had changed. The next morning, Jack stood on the edge of the village, looking at the rising sun. His bag was ready, and his boots clean. He felt the call of his world far beyond the sky, but he also felt the pull of this place, the pull of life that had touched his heart. The mother came to him with Zelu by her side. She said, "The path is open now. You can go if you wish, but you can also stay." Zelu looked at him with wide eyes, not asking, not begging, just waiting. Jack knelt and looked at the boy. "You are strong, Zelu, stronger than most people I know, and your heart is brave." He stood and looked at the sky. One ship waited for him beyond the clouds, but he did not send the signal to call. Yeet turned back and said, "I will stay for now. There is still more to learn and more to protect." Hirtha mother smiled, and the wind moved through the trees in soft waves like the mountain itself gave a soft breath of thanks. That evening, they walked to the edge of the forest where the flowers glowed with every step. The stars above were clear and calm. Jack looked at them and said softly, "Sometimes we run to escape, but sometimes we run to find where we belong." Zelu held his hand and looked up at the sky, and for the first time in many nights, he did not feel afraid. They walked back to the village as lights lit the path behind them, not with magic, but with hope. And far behind, in the heart of the mountain, a soft glow remained. Not asleep, not angry, just waiting, because the mountain never forgets him. Now it remembered a human who walked without fear and gave light in the dark.